This video is requested by Melvin, Kagakir, Sheer Heart Attack, Sid Speed, Valcower672, and Wonderboy. Hello and welcome back to Quirk Analysis 101, the series where I give you a detailed rundown on the quirks in the world of My Hero Academia. In the last video, I discussed the ability that belongs to the scorching hot, crispy bacon emo boy with more issues than there are horrifically cringe-worthy ships in the fandom, Dabi, aka and his Princess Azula wannabe quirk, Cremation. Also, fun fact, Dabi is actually the Japanese for the word cremation. So, we have another unimaginative villain who named himself after his quirk. Like, come on. I mean, at this stage, I'd take Flamies Go Fwoosh Fwoosh or something else. You dumbass villains are so much better than this. In today's video, I'll be discussing the quirk that belongs to Mr. Clean, Senior I wore masks before it was mandatory, no papa, I'll leave to go for the cigarettes, Kai Chisaki, aka Overhaul. But before I begin, don't forget to Detroit smash that like button and spook on into that subscribe button's DMs to hit that notification bell. And now, without further ado, let's reassemble our way on over to the mind-melting, matter-manipulating quirk that is Overhaul. Wait, his quirk's name is Overhaul? Ah, come on! Overhaul is an emitter type quirk which first appeared in chapter 115 of the My Hero manga and episode 62 of the anime. This quirk grants its user the ability to disassemble anything they touch as well as reassemble it in any configuration they desire, effectively giving them full control over matter. So basically, anything the user can lay their finger on effectively becomes their bitch. Now this quirk works both on inorganic and organic matter. So the user can not only manipulate any object they come in contact with, but also the physical makeup of any person or living creature. This, as we have seen in the series, proves to be extremely useful in a multitude of situations, as Overhaul, the person not the quirk, has used this power offensively, obliterating opponents with a single touch, and defensively, by healing allies, deconstructing them and reconstructing them without their wounds, and by seemingly bringing some people back from the dead. That's right, Overhaul has literally wiped people out of existence and then brought them back moments later feeling better than ever. Who knew coming down with a case of the explosions would be the world's best remedy? Not me. Hey Dave, do you still have that broken arm?
Oh hey Mr. Lunchtime, actually it's getting a bit
He should be back any minute now. Any minute. And now it's time to talk about this quirk's abilities, for which I'm gonna be honest, due to the nature of this quirk, there are actually quite a lot of. For starters, offensively, this quirk is insane. As I've previously mentioned, all the user has to do is touch their opponent and they can disassemble their target instantaneously, winning any conflict with the flick of a finger. If Thanos snapping your opponent isn't your forte, however, and you wanted to go for a non-lethal approach upon touching your opponent, you could instead remove, restrain, or rearrange their limbs and or organs, rendering them immobile. Remember, this quirk grants you full control over matter. So if you wanted to do something like rearrange a person's face or replace their nipples with eyes and eyes with nipples, or rearrange your surrogate father's brain so that he tragically is placed in a coma that is only irreversible by your hand, then you are free to do so. Once you make contact with your target, it's game over. However, not all situations are at close range, and there may be times when your target is at a distance. But fear not, as for long-ranged attacks, the user can activate this quirk on their surroundings, such as the ground, a wall, or even the ceiling, and use them to attack. So far, we have seen Overhaul form holes and new walls to trap incoming opponents, create spikes to stab and pierce enemies, while also making the battlefield difficult terrain to traverse, and make platforms to gain better footing and for increased mobility. And in case you're wondering, yes, if the user puts their hand on the ground, they can basically travel Earthbender style around the area. Now, while these are pretty versatile and unique attacks, I'm sure with a little more creativity, you could do a hell of a lot more. Maybe even go Full Metal Alchemist style and just make a giant fist out of the wall to punch your enemies with. In terms of defensive or supportive abilities, just like for offense, this quirk does have quite a few. For defense, as I have said, the user can form holes and walls to trap opponents, but they can also use these walls and holes for for cover from incoming attacks or projectiles, and to hide behind to delay opponents when attempting to make a quick getaway. For healing purposes, this quirk has been shown to have the ability to reconstruct people back into a biologically perfect state. What this means is the user can deconstruct a person by ripping them apart at a molecular level and then reconstruct them without any of their previous ailments or injuries. Basically, if you're hurt, this quirk breaks you into pieces and then puts those pieces back together in the right position. So if your friend has something like a broken leg, you can just destroy their leg and rebuild it fully healed. This healing method also seems to work with any form of injury or ailment, as we have seen Overhaul tear off Kendo Rappa's entire upper body in a fight, killing him, and then putting his upper body back, bringing him back to life in a matter of seconds. Now, as insane as this already sounds, this also technically means that as long as there is a body to work with, Overhaul can bring people back from the dead, which is absolutely positively insane to think about. Although it is mentioned that the deconstruction process the recipient goes through before they are reconstructed is excruciatingly painful, which makes all the experiments he did on Eri all the more fucked up. Like, there were times where he straight up killed her and was just like, oopsie, better fix her. Oh yeah, you better believe Overhaul has canonically killed Eri and then used his quirk on her, putting her through excruciating pain to bring her back to life. This series gets dark. Now, while Overhaul has no officially named super moves, there is a technique Overhaul can perform which I personally would classify as a super move, and that move is Fusion. Fusion allows the user of this quirk to recombine two different objects or beings into a single entity that possesses components of both subjects, including quirks. To perform this technique, the user must hold both elements they want to merge with each separate hand. Basically, if the user has their hand on one object and their other hand on another, they can fuse these two objects together. Now, this technique is super powerful, especially since it can fuse people together into one multi-quirk wielding entity. We have seen Overhaul use this technique when he fused himself with Shin Nomoto, in which he took this absolutely monstrous form, and again when he fused with Rikiya Katsukame, and he became the final boss of a Demon Souls game. It's also important to note that the user can choose which characteristics they want to be most prominent in each fusion. This is why in both fusions Overhaul himself is in full control over the new body, and why he can freely use his subordinates' quirks. But while this is cool and all, the main thing that intrigues me about this is this technique essentially gives you the ability to do fusions out of Dragon Ball Z. That's crazy. Next thing you know, people will be fighting over who's stronger, is Zukago or Bakuku. Personally, my money's on Shokago. But now it's time to talk about this quirk's weaknesses, for which, as amazing and as powerful as this quirk is, there are unfortunately a good amount of. The first and most prominent of which is the fact that this power's quirk factor lies entirely in the user's hands. So if the user's arms are restrained or they were to ironically get overhauled, they would lose this ability entirely, bringing you from a god tier status to that of a measly peasant. Hey, for what he did to Eri, I think he deserved it. Another weakness associated with this quirk is the fact that the user must be touching something for Overhaul to activate. This puts the user at a huge disadvantage when it comes to aerial combat and renders them practically useless while in the air. This is actually one of the reasons why Midoriya kicked Overhaul into the sky for their final conflict. Overhaul was playing checkers while Midoriya was playing chess. There's also the fact that this quirk takes longer to activate on bigger objects. So, while it works almost instantaneously on people, if the user was to manipulate, say, the ground or the wall, it would take a few seconds to work. And as we've seen in Overhaul's fight with Lemillion, all it takes is a few seconds to get out of the way. Speaking of affecting the wall or the ground, unlike Shigaraki's decay, the effects of Overhaul can't spread from one object to another. The user can only manipulate the object they are touching. This means that if the ground is broken up into sections, or if there are gaps between walls, the user won't be able to manipulate anything outside of the part that they are touching. There's also a short cooldown period between usages of this quirk, meaning that once this quirk activates, there is a short period of time where you won't be able to activate it again. Now, this cooldown period is extremely short, being max a few seconds. But in a world with guys who can walk through walls and kick you into into space, every second counts. But the most devastating weakness that comes with this quirk is the fact that you have to know what in God's name you're doing. When Overhaul uses this quirk on a person, he specifically has to pinpoint what part of their body he's using it on and how that body part will be affected. Now, while this shouldn't be a problem if you just plan on exploding people, it is a serious problem if you're trying to put things or people back together. Overhaul, the person, has studied human anatomy, diseases, and has plenty of experience learning about how bodies work through countless fights and by experimenting on Eri. So it makes sense that he would know exactly how the human body is supposed to work and how to put it back right. But if this quirk was to fall into the hands of your average Joe Schmo, then the whole healing factor thing will be a serious problem. I mean, I guarantee the majority of people don't even know what a hallux is, let alone how it works. And I bet my big toe on that one. But enough of the weaknesses, now it's time to talk about this quirk's potential. And let's just say, with a quirk that literally allows you to manipulate matter like it's Play-Doh, there's a lot of potential. One of the most useful of which is the fact that the user can perform fusion. The user of this quirk can fuse any two objects together, meaning there is a whole ass smorgasbord of possible fusions and creations this quirk user can make. I mean, to be honest, this whole fusion thing could probably be a quirk on its own. You could create super weapons, entirely new elements, human-animal hybrids, human-machine hybrids, animal-machine hybrids, animal-animal hybrids, and so on and so on. Think of any two things in the world and mash them together, boom, this quirk can make it. It's also really important to note that once something is fused, it can be fused again. So if you wanted to create a triple threat atrocity like man, bear, pig, half man, half bear, half pig, yeah, sure, that's how that works, you can. But this also means there is no limit on the number of people the user can fuse with, effectively granting them the ability to stockpile and steal quirks just like All for One. Now that's an insane power. But the greatest potential this quirk offers is if it could work on matter, now hear me out, in any of its forms. The base description of this quirk explains that Overhaul disassembles and reassembles matter at the user's will, but in practice, we've only seen it used on matter that is in a solid state. However, if the base description is true, then we can take it there is the possibility that this quirk can also be used on liquids and gases, which would be one of the craziest quirk awakenings to ever exist. It would essentially grant the user the ability to control space itself. I'm talking God tier quirk. Now, it could be the case that Overhaul can affect liquid and gases already. However, due to the fact that the molecules of matter in these states are not attached to one another, the user can only affect one molecule at a time, rendering it practically useless. But a boy can dream. But with all of the potential out of the way, now it's time to talk about just how horrifying this quirk can really be. And to be honest, I don't really need to say much because the most terrible thing this quirk can do has already happened. Picture the scene. You're tied down to a chair, not by rope, but by your own skin, as your body and the seat have seemingly become one. A hand touches your forehead, and all of a sudden, your body begins to rip itself apart. Your skin and bone getting torn into nothingness, molecule by molecule. Your organs begin to move as if they have a life of their own, twisting and squirming, almost as if they are begging for escape. Your lungs fill with blood and you begin to choke, desperately trying to gasp for air. But just before you pass out, the blood briefly disappears, giving you just enough time to get your breath back before it reappears and you start to choke again. As your body slowly destroys itself, with seemingly no cause, you suffer the most excruciating pain. A pain so terrible, you don't beg for it to stop, you beg to stop existing. And after an unperceivable amount of time and terror, your wish finally comes true. You succumb to the darkness and are finally free until you wake up in the same room, tied to the same chair, in the same hellish situation. Not even death can set you free. And as a hand touches your forehead, you go through the same brutal, excruciating process again and again and again. There is no escaping. And that's everything you need to know about the quirk Overhaul. Overall, this quirk can undoubtedly be considered a god to your quirk, and its versatility, usefulness, and uniqueness is next to none. Would I like to have this quirk in the real world? Abso-fucking-lutely I would. I mean, you basically gain the power of an alchemist from the Full Metal Alchemist world. Who wouldn't want that? But let me know what you think. Would you like to have the Overhaul quirk? And what quirk would you like me to cover in this series next? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Plus Ultra.